Have you ever noticed how a single phrase can send thousands of people searching for answers almost overnight? That's exactly what happened when the words silver platter began appearing alongside renewed discussion of the Nancy Guthrie case. Social media filled with claims that the FBI had uncovered disturbing new footage, identified a shocking suspect, and was preparing to reveal evidence that would change everything investigators thought they knew. But how much of that was actually true? And how did one of the most talked about investigations become surrounded by so many competing stories? If you enjoy carefully researched documentaries that separate confirmed facts from rumor and speculation, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We spend the time digging through official records, public statements, and credible reporting so you don't have to. And before we continue, we'd love to know where you're watching from today. Leave a comment below and tell us your city, state, or country. It's always fascinating to see how far these investigations reach. The first thing that needs to be established is that, despite the dramatic headlines circulating online, no verified FBI press conference has publicly confirmed a new suspect connected to Nancy Guthrie under an investigation known as Silver Platter. That doesn't mean people haven't been asking questions. In fact, the opposite is true. Interest in the case has grown steadily as internet discussions, amateur investigators, and true crime communities have revisited every known detail. One reason the story continues to attract attention is because unanswered questions tend to take on a life of their own. When official information is limited, speculation often rushes in to fill the gaps. Videos begin appearing online with dramatic titles. Anonymous sources are quoted. Grainy photographs are presented as major discoveries. Before long, it becomes difficult to separate documented evidence from creative storytelling. That raises another question. What do we actually know? According to publicly available reporting, investigators have always relied on evidence that could be independently verified. Law enforcement agencies typically avoid discussing active investigative techniques in detail, especially when releasing information could affect witnesses or compromise future proceedings. Former investigators interviewed by various news organizations have repeatedly explained that silence from authorities is often interpreted as inactivity when, in reality, it may simply reflect standard investigative practice. As online interest increased, so did claims about hidden surveillance videos and previously unseen recordings. Some creators insisted that disturbing footage had finally surfaced. Others argued that federal investigators had quietly identified an entirely new suspect whose identity had been kept from the public. However, those claims have not been supported by official public documentation. That distinction matters. In many high-profile investigations, authorities occasionally release surveillance images or request public assistance identifying people captured on camera. But releasing footage is very different from confirming that someone shown in a recording is a criminal suspect. Investigators often seek additional information precisely because they do not yet know who the individual is, or what role, if any, that person may have played. Former federal investigators have frequently noted in interviews that viewers sometimes mistake routine evidence collection for confirmation of guilt. Those are not the same thing. The phrase silver platter has created even more confusion. Depending on where someone first encountered the story, it has been described as an FBI operation, an internal code name, a whistleblower leak, or even the title of a confidential evidence file. Yet no official public record currently confirms any of those descriptions. Instead, researchers examining available documents have found something different. The phrase appears to have spread largely through online discussions before becoming attached to increasingly dramatic videos and posts. Each retelling added another layer until many viewers assumed the underlying claims had already been verified. Investigators have seen this pattern before. During numerous nationally known criminal investigations, false documents, fabricated witness statements, and edited videos have circulated widely online. Some were created for attention. Others may have started as misunderstandings before being repeated so many times that they appeared credible. That doesn't mean every new lead should be dismissed. It simply means each claim deserves the same careful question. Can it be verified? If the answer is no, responsible investigators continue looking rather than assuming. Meanwhile, people familiar with complex investigations often point out another important reality. Cases sometimes evolve slowly because forensic testing, digital analysis, and witness interviews require patience. Evidence isn't assembled in the dramatic fashion often portrayed in television dramas. Instead, detectives frequently spend months, or even years, comparing records, reviewing timelines, and confirming seemingly minor details before reaching meaningful conclusions. That slower process rarely makes headlines. What does capture attention are dramatic announcements suggesting that everything has suddenly changed. That's why claims involving newly discovered footage deserve particular scrutiny. Authentic video evidence can certainly reshape an investigation. But experts in digital forensics also warn that modern editing technology has made manipulated clips increasingly convincing. Before investigators treat any recording as evidence, they typically examine metadata, chain of custody, timestamps, compression artifacts, and other technical indicators that help determine whether a video is genuine. Without that verification, even a convincing recording cannot automatically be accepted as reliable evidence. So where does that leave the growing speculation surrounding Nancy Guthrie and the supposed FBI revelations? At this point, it leaves us with two very different stories. One is the story spreading rapidly online, a story of shocking suspects, hidden footage, secret investigations, and dramatic federal breakthroughs. The other is the documented story built from confirmed statements, public records, and verified reporting, where many of the loudest claims remain unconfirmed. And somewhere between those two versions lies the question investigators and viewers continue asking. If the most dramatic claims cannot yet be verified, why have they gained so much attention, and what evidence has actually fueled the renewed interest in the first place? That's where the investigation becomes even more interesting. The growing attention surrounding these claims didn't happen overnight. It built gradually, as more videos, blog posts, and online discussions repeated many of the same allegations. In some cases, the wording was nearly identical, suggesting that later reports were relying on earlier social media posts rather than on independent reporting. Before long, many viewers had the impression that the FBI had quietly confirmed a major breakthrough, even though no official public statement reflected that conclusion. That pattern has become increasingly common in the digital age. Once a dramatic claim begins circulating, it often takes on a life of its own. One creator cites another, headlines become more sensational with each retelling, and the distinction between a rumor and a documented fact becomes harder to recognize. Investigators have repeatedly warned that this can complicate public understanding of an active or unresolved case because witnesses may unintentionally repeat information they saw online instead of recalling what they personally observed. Despite the speculation, law enforcement agencies generally follow a predictable process whenever potentially significant evidence comes to light. If investigators receive new video footage, for example, they don't immediately announce its contents. Instead, specialists examine where it came from, when it was created, whether it has been altered, and how it fits into the existing timeline. Even if the footage appears convincing at first glance, it cannot be treated as reliable evidence until that verification process is complete. Former FBI officials have discussed this process in interviews involving other major criminal investigations. They have explained that investigators often possess far more information than the public realizes, but they release only what serves the investigation. Holding back details is not necessarily an indication of secrecy or misconduct. More often, it is intended to protect witness testimony, preserve the integrity of forensic evidence, or prevent false confessions from people seeking attention. That helps explain why many online claims about hidden evidence remain difficult to evaluate. Without official confirmation, it is impossible to know whether such material actually exists, whether investigators have reviewed it, or whether it has any relevance to the case at all. Still, the renewed interest did encourage many independent researchers to revisit the available public record. They examined timelines, compared previous news reports, reviewed court documents where applicable, and searched for inconsistencies. Some noticed details they believed deserved additional attention. Others concluded that many supposed discoveries had already been addressed years earlier. According to legal experts who have commented on high-profile investigations in general, revisiting evidence can sometimes uncover overlooked information. At the same time, repeatedly reviewing the same material can also lead people to see patterns that are not actually supported by objective evidence. Confirmation bias is a well-known challenge in criminal investigations, which is why experienced detectives rely on corroborating evidence instead of assumptions. One of the more persistent online discussions has centered on the possibility of an unidentified individual who may have appeared in previously referenced material connected to the broader investigation. Various internet commentators have suggested that this individual was secretly elevated to suspect status. However, no publicly available law enforcement announcement has confirmed that such a designation has been made. That distinction is especially important because being identified, questioned, or even appearing in investigative material does not automatically make someone a criminal suspect. Detectives routinely interview individuals who ultimately have no involvement in a crime. They also examine countless leads that are later ruled out through forensic testing, verified alibis, or additional witness statements. As the conversation continued to grow online, another issue became increasingly apparent. Short video clips and screenshots were often presented without their original context. In several widely discussed cases unrelated to this investigation, similar editing techniques have created misleading impressions by removing surrounding footage or omitting critical information. Digital forensic specialists consistently emphasize that context matters just as much as the image itself. Meanwhile, those following the case closely continued asking why the story refused to fade. Part of the answer may lie in human nature. Unanswered questions invite continued curiosity. When an investigation leaves important details unresolved, people naturally search for explanations. Some rely on official reporting. Others are drawn toward theories that promise hidden answers. Yet history shows that the most compelling explanation is not always the correct one. Investigators are trained to move cautiously for exactly that reason. A theory may appear convincing until one verified fact contradicts it. A witness may seem credible until documentary evidence proves otherwise. Cases that appear straightforward at first can become far more complicated once every piece of evidence is carefully examined. Even now, many of the claims circulating under the label silver platter remain unsupported by publicly available documentation. That does not prove every claim is false. It simply means that responsible investigators and responsible journalists cannot present them as established facts without evidence. What remains beyond dispute is that public interest in the case has been reignited. Whether that renewed attention eventually leads to meaningful new information or simply generates another wave of speculation is something only time will answer. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. If the loudest claims cannot yet be verified, what does the documented evidence actually reveal when everything is laid out side by side? And does it point toward answers that have been overlooked all along? As we reach the end of this investigation, it's worth returning to the question that started it all. Were the online headlines about the FBI exposing the most disturbing suspect in footage yet, supported by verified evidence, or had the story grown far beyond what the public record could actually confirm? Based on the information that is publicly available, there is no official confirmation that the FBI has announced a breakthrough matching those dramatic claims. No verified press release, public court filing, or law enforcement statement confirms the existence of an operation publicly known as Silver Platter connected to the case, nor is there documented evidence that federal authorities have identified a newly exposed suspect in the manner described by many online posts. That doesn't mean investigators have stopped working, nor does it mean every unanswered question has been resolved. In complex investigations, new information can emerge months or even years later. Witnesses sometimes come forward unexpectedly. Advances in forensic science have helped solve cases once believed impossible to crack. Digital evidence can also be re-examined using technology that wasn't available when it was first collected. Those possibilities are real, but they should never be confused with proof that a breakthrough has already happened. Throughout this investigation, one lesson has appeared again and again. There is a significant difference between a verified fact and a widely shared claim. The internet has made it easier than ever for information to spread across the world within minutes. Unfortunately, that includes misinformation. A dramatic title can be repeated thousands of times before anyone stops to ask where the information actually came from. Responsible investigators work in the opposite direction. They begin with evidence. Every statement is tested against documents, interviews, forensic findings, and witness accounts. If a claim cannot be supported, it remains just that, a claim. It may later prove to be correct, or it may be completely unfounded. But until evidence exists, investigators cannot treat it as fact. Former law enforcement officials have often explained that public expectations rarely match the reality of criminal investigations. Television and social media tend to focus on dramatic reveals and shocking twists. Real investigations are usually much quieter. Detectives spend countless hours reviewing records, verifying timelines, interviewing witnesses, and checking details that may seem insignificant until they fit into a much larger picture. That careful process can be frustrating for people waiting for answers, especially in cases that have generated widespread public attention. Families, friends, and communities naturally want certainty. They want someone to explain exactly what happened and who was responsible. But the justice system depends on evidence that can withstand scrutiny, not on theories that gain popularity online. The renewed interest surrounding this case has nevertheless served one positive purpose. It has encouraged many people to revisit original reporting rather than relying solely on viral headlines. More viewers are asking where information comes from, whether official sources support it, and whether quotations or documents can be independently verified. Those are important questions, not only for this investigation, but for every major case that captures public attention. If credible new evidence is ever released through official channels, it deserves careful examination. If investigators announce additional findings backed by documentation, those developments should be reported accurately and placed in their proper context. Until then, separating confirmed information from speculation remains the most responsible approach. Perhaps that is the biggest takeaway from this story. The loudest headline is not always the most accurate one. Sometimes the truth moves slowly, hidden beneath layers of rumor, misunderstanding, and assumptions. Finding that truth requires patience, careful documentation, and a willingness to acknowledge what is known just as clearly as what remains uncertain. So now we'd like to hear your thoughts. After looking at the difference between the verified public record and the claims circulating online, do you believe social media is helping people better understand investigations like this, or do you think it often makes separating fact from fiction even more difficult? If you enjoy carefully researched documentaries that focus on verified information instead of sensational rumors, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll continue following important investigations, examining new developments as they are confirmed, and bringing you well-researched updates whenever reliable information becomes available.